Welcome, everyone, to our Beyond the Buzz tonight with Dr. Andrea Brenner. We're so excited to have her back for a second time with us here at Georgia Tech. And families, thank you all for taking the time to be here. I think this will be a really fun learning experience, question and answer time. And just, it's hard to believe that we're already here thinking about our students kind of coming home for an extended visit. So, Dr. Brenner has such a wealth of knowledge on this topic, and I will let her further introduce herself. But thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us tonight. And I'll
Thank you
hand
so
it over.
much for having me, Sharon. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm going to present a lot of information to you. And of course, these slides will be available to all Georgia Tech families. So you don't need to take a lot of notes. The recordings will be available. The slides will be available for everyone. So a little bit about me. I am a college transition educator. I'm actually a sociologist by training. I was a professor and a first-year administrator. For over 25 years. So spent a lot of time up close and personal with first year college students. And I am the co-author of the book, How to College, What to Know Before You Go and When You're There, which is a student-facing book, although read by a lot of families, that kind of takes students through that transition to college and the first year of college. And I am also the creator of the Talking College card decks, and these are filled with discussion prompts, not only about the transition to college, but really specific scenarios that come up in the college experience. We have several card decks out, five actually out, and the one that might interest this particular group with students already in college is the student and parent deck, which is available in English and in Spanish. I'll talk a little bit about it at the end, but some of the discussion prompts that I'm going to talk about tonight you can find in the card deck. And there is a promo code if it's something that you're interested in purchasing. They're great dinner table conversations over Thanksgiving or winter break. So let's get started. So your new college students' first long visit home can really be wonderful, but it can also be stressful. And we might be talking about Thanksgiving. We might be talking about winter break. Even if they've come home for a weekend or even a long weekend, this is probably the first long-ish break. And that could really sort of change the tenor of the experience and that parent-child relationship. So what I argue is that knowing the common pitfalls can really normalize the discomfort of welcoming home an adult who has lived away from home. And I put adult in in quotation marks, because many of us as parents, struggle sometimes to think of our teens as adults. But of course, the college does recognize them as adults. And so that's something to keep in mind. And it's different than when they were living with us and when they were still in high school because they've lived on their own. And it also can help create a positive visit for members of the family if there is open dialogue. And I'll tell you a little more about that. So I'm going to go through about 10, 11 different kind of themes. And these are based on focus groups with first year parents and also first year students. When they talk to us after their first big visit home, either Thanksgiving or winter break, most of these focus groups took place in the spring semester, looking back at that first visit and really sort of talking honestly about the problems that occurred and maybe how some of those issues could have been avoided. So the first one here is I want to see my friends. That's something that you might hear quite a bit. And just kind of preparing you for it. So it's really important for college students coming home to connect with friends or romantic relationships over this break, especially if it's the first lengthy time that they're home. Often these are friends from high school, and some of them have stayed in touch by text or by social media or by phone. But some of those relationships have fallen a little bit to the wayside, and there's a little bit of anxiety sometimes of these students reconnecting with old friends. Of course, coming home is this time to catch up with their peers, but it really is up to the parents to set rules about the visit. And so I want you to really think about the fact that they are coming home to your home. Obviously, it's their home as well, but you do set the rules, even though they're not used to rules when they're living on their own. They are not coming home to your home when you can set those rules. So it really would make sense to kind of set time with friends and time with family aside, maybe talking in advance about really how what is necessary, what is needed, what are those non-negotiables. For example, it's great that you want to see your friends, but there are non-negotiable times that you have to be with family, and these are the times. And the earlier you can talk to your students about what that week might look like, the better. Sometimes you might hear, well, I really want to see my college friends who live locally. And it's perfectly acceptable for you to say to them, you know what? That's not going to fly right here. You see them all the time. And we're going to set this time aside for people you don't see when you're away at college. Um, and really prepare for feelings about those changed friendships. And that's something that surprises a lot of first year college students that think that they're just going to fall right into the same patterns with their best friends from high school. Some might, but sometimes these are awkward. And keep in mind that what they have seen about their friends who are at other universities is often through social media. And sometimes those images are very generous. Students are usually showing their best foot forward. And if your student has struggled at all in their first semester, they might be anxious about a student who on social media is looking like it's just rainbows and unicorns. So having a conversation with them in advance, are you anxious about some of those changed friendships? What are your plans for seeing friends from home? Let's talk about it. And the biggest complaint about Thanksgiving break from first year parents is sharing their kids with their high school friends. That's something that parents are very, very open with us in focus groups, and just something to keep in mind. If you feel that way, it's very, very normative. Next one is home feels different. And that can really hurt a parent who wants to make this a welcoming experience for their student. So I would prepare them for changes in family dynamics and even physical spaces. Something like changing their room into a guest room or even using half of their closet for something can feel very, very odd to a student who wants to go back to that comfortable environment that they were in before college. And there is this sort of strange desire for the sense of their childhood home, but with all of the adult privileges that they've had in college. And that's something that actually parents and students talk about really having trouble balancing because they're coming home and sometimes there's a little bit of regression there. They're really excited for somebody else to cook for them or shopping for food for them, that they open the fridge or the cabinets and there's all their favorite foods and they expect that and they want that. And often you want to provide that for them. But also they have a hard time, with the fact that you actually do have requirements for them coming at home. So there's also anxiety about being on your turf. And that's a strange thing to say because, of course, it is home as well. But if the last time you saw them was at family weekend at Georgia Tech, that was their turf, right? Their college environment, their new home. And now they're coming back to what I would consider your turf, and that can really be a challenge. We hear from a lot of students who have seen family dynamics shifting. That could be something very big like divorce or something small, as I mentioned, like, losing half of their closet to somebody else's clothing. And that comment about, am I the outsider now? Before it seemed like I was part of the family, but I've been away for a while and now I have to reinsert myself in that home dynamics. And that's even more prevalent when there's siblings at home, younger siblings at home. Many parents report that their students' new lens of the world comes off sounding critical of their family dynamics and behavior. And that's something you should be very aware of. We send students to college to expand their minds, to think differently than they did before. But they might come and they might challenge you. They might challenge you politically. They might challenge you in terms of the way you, for example, spend money or the way you spend time with family. And just be prepared that it's a balance because college is a time for them to think differently, to open those brains. But at the same time, when they come home, you do want them to feel like they're part of that family unit. Another thing we hear very, very common is I'm exhausted, and it's very real. And it's important in your scheduling of the time that they're home to leave time for them to really sleep. And sleep in their own beds if possible. And so that should be a quiet environment where you can say, all right, I know you need an hour long nap. etc. Avoid overprogramming during their visit. That's something that students complain quite a bit about. And parents actually looking back on it say, oh, I wish I had a little more downtime for them to just play a game with the family, hang out, watch TV, just be present, even if that means that the student is actually doing homework in a corner. Do keep in mind, and this is very hard for us as parents who are just ready to completely stop everything and welcome our kids home, but their schoolwork doesn't end during their school breaks. And ask them in advance what they will need. So if they're planning on coming home, let's say on a Tuesday or Wednesday before the holiday, say to them, tell me about your homework. What do you have to accomplish when you're home? How much time do you need? That doesn't mean, remember, we're talking about, 18, 19-year-old brains, doesn't mean they have necessarily figured that out, but they can give you a general idea of, I have this paper due, or I have to prepare for this exam that's coming up, etc. Do also note that their sleeping patterns have changed since high school. Many college students learn to nap for the first time. Many of them didn't even have time in high school to nap. And so napping is a big part of a college existence. They're also used to nobody telling them what time to go to bed or what time to get up or if napping is okay. This statistic on the bottom, I think, is worth mentioning. 60% of college students don't get quality sleep when they're on campus, and breaks are really the perfect time for them to recoup before they head back for that last stretch of the semester. However, that doesn't always line up with what families have planned. So the earlier you can start talking to them about what their homework looks like, how much sleep they're probably going to be asking for during their break, the better. Excuse me, don't judge the new me. That's something that we hear quite a bit. So many students explore new identities in college, and that's, of course, we all know this, but it really becomes very relevant when they are home, back in our homes. Hot button issues for some families may arise during this first lengthy homecoming, hopefully not at the Thanksgiving table, but hopefully in conversation. They may make a big announcement of a romantic relationship or a different identity, for example, LGBTQ plus. They may have decided to change a major or career path and not discuss that with you yet and are waiting for that big announcement, and thinking, I don't want to be a business major after all. So do be prepared for these and obviously try not to let them blow up. There's also a fear of being misunderstood or alienated from the new choices and identities that they're making. So, maybe take a beat before responding if something is startling to you that you hear when your student is talking about how they identify in case that is different. Many first year students report anxiety about interactions with their families during this first lengthy homecoming. Because of issues of criticism or acceptance, we've even had families say that they, withholding tuition or they're spending money for a way a student is now identifying. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but keep in mind that extended family may also be weighing in, for example, grandparents. And that's a conversation, the earlier the better to have. But it's my room. Alone time is, of course, important, especially if your students are coming back from a campus where they've had a roommate and they have really struggled for that privacy, that time of being alone. Many of them have bigger rooms at home than they have on their college campus, that they're sharing maybe a very, very small space with a roommate or more than one roommate. Hopefully, those people respect their privacy, but it can be a real struggle. And coming back to their own space is extremely important. Um, if they do share a room at home, if this is a student, if your kid is sharing a room with a sibling, for example, consider a separate temporary space for one or the other so that they actually can have a little bit of space to call their own. It's really, really important, especially if they're coming back from roommate experiences. I would advise parents to be realistic about room cleanliness and organizational rules. It doesn't mean your student has gotten messier in college, although that's certainly possible, but really be realistic. So maybe I expect you to make your bed, or I expect you to have your door to your room closed. So think about what you want to insist upon when they're home, knowing that they have probably a very different organizational plan for their room in college than they do at home. I would also encourage you to provide a quiet place to study without others interfering. And for many families, that's just the local public library. If you have a house full of guests and they can't get that time, that's really important. There is an essence of students reporting that they're coming home to their childhood. And often you will see that first Thanksgiving or winter break home, students are asking for a box or a crate, and they're starting to take down those little bits of their childhood, the trophies or things that feel childlike to them, maybe stuffed animals, etc. Expect that. Don't get too emotional about it, and make sure you've got a box for them to do something like that. Parents relate neatness and organization in a different way than the teen brain does, right? So messy doesn't necessarily mean disorganized, even though to us as adults, it can very much look that way. Ugh, too many questions. That's something we also hear from students. So of course, it's natural for you as parents, as well as for extended family, to be curious and to want to ask students a barrage of questions about their college experience. But I want you to think about that student's perspective, right? They're home for the first time and they're hearing, how's college? Do you like it? What are your, what's your major? What are your grades? What are you doing for summer break? What are your post-graduation plans? It can feel extremely overwhelming, especially if your student has struggled either academically or socially or both. For example, you may have a student coming home who has really just nailed it in the classroom and is just really succeeding there, but hasn't really found their people yet. And that's very, very common. They've only been there for a short period of time in this longer term of probably 4 years. Think, really through your student's lens. How will these questions be received and what are ways they can reply? And I would encourage parents to do one of two things. Either if you do have extended family who are going to be asking a ton of questions that can be overwhelming to their students, to kind of tell them in advance, you know what, let them just kind of be. Maybe we'll wait for winter break for these questions, or we'll wait to the summer because they're still figuring things out. I would also encourage conversation with your student in advance. I know you're still thinking about your major. You don't really know what you want to focus on for a career. So, how are you going to answer that question when Uncle so and so asks you? And you can tease out those answers with them and give them some help. Lots of students haven't yet thought about their summer break plans. Other students have jobs already, but many have not. And so that can feel quite overwhelming, especially if they've just started their first year of college and somebody's asking them about their postgraduate plans. The next one we hear a lot is, I'm an adult at school. And as I mentioned earlier, parenting an adult who has lived away from home can be really challenging. And again, thinking about that student's perspective is really important. When they come back to our environment, they move into that childlike role often. But do remember that they have been doing all of this stuff on their own. Maybe not well, but they've been doing this stuff on their own. College success relies on things like self-reliance and independent decision making. And with that comes successes and sometimes struggles with time management. That's something that most common complaints about first year students is their time management. They just haven't figured it out. And if we think about it, it really makes sense. Most of them have come from high school experiences that were very structured, very regimented. There may have been a bell or a buzzer to tell them what time to be in class, what time to eat lunch, what time they were dismissed, and then have extracurricular activities or work after school. College is so different. They may have a regular schedule on Monday and Wednesday, but Tuesdays they may have no class at all. And they are the ones that have to really figure out their time management because it is much more an adult experience than it was in high school when it was so regimented. I can tell you my experience as a college professor working with first year students, it was very, very common for first year students not even to make or allot time for a lunch break. They just planned their classes that they wanted to take and they didn't really think about things. They didn't even think how long it might take them to walk from one end of campus to another. So time management has been probably a struggle for most of those students. Also, their sleep schedule, as mentioned earlier, has probably shifted quite a bit. They may be going to bed much later and getting up later. So think about that. Choosing their own food is something that it doesn't, we don't think much of as parents. Of course, many of us want to provide foods that they might like, but know that they are changing. Their identity is changing. Maybe even their eating habits or their types of food that they have been eating have changed. They might be thrilled to have some of those home cooked foods, but also choosing food is something that they've been doing on their own for a while. And now to come back into the environment where a family says, this is what you're being served, that can be really challenging for some students. Now they're being told where to be, how long to sleep, even what to eat or when to eat. And this can really invite tension. So again, the earlier, the better. Talking to your students about what kind of foods do you want to have at home? Have your eating habits changed, etc. Maybe they'll say to you, I'm eating more vegetables, and that you can prepare for that. Especially if your student has struggled with independence in these last couple of months, I would argue that parents should attempt to limit that caretaking during their homecoming. And sometimes that's hard to do, right? We love our kids and we want to welcome them back. We want to do their laundry. We want to wake them up without having them wake up with an alarm. But that actually can be detrimental. That pampering can often set back students, especially those who have really struggled with their independence in college. So I know it's something that we want to do as parents. We want to just kind of baby them, but make sure you think about, is this going to set them back in any way? This is something that's a real struggle for many parents. They hear their students say, I don't want to go back. Not uncommon. Sometimes it's part of that first year process, and it's really not something to raise alarms. So, of course, sometimes it can be something that's quite serious. You may have a student who has bid for a sorority slot and didn't get a bid. You may have a student that tried out for an a cappella group or a rec soccer team and it didn't work out. And they can feel pretty low about themselves. So something that seems kind of minor to maybe to the parents. But the first year process is a slow one. Most students really don't truly connect with their college until they go back to college in January. So if Thanksgiving, it's a little touch and go in terms of hearing that your student is maybe I'm not connecting, I haven't found my people, I'm not sure this is the right school for me, I want to transfer, all of those things. I really encourage you to start having conversations about it. But also, if you talk to them in advance and you can say, I attended this webinar or I read this thing, and I'm realizing it's really common for students to kind of feel iffy about their college until usually well into the winter. Other times, of course, it is a real concern. So keep in mind if your student has not yet found any connections to peers, and I'm talking about not even one friend or one peer leader like an RA that they've connected with. If they are living, really struggling to live independently, are they not doing their laundry? Are they not washing their sheets? Are they really struggling with their roommate and not knowing how to work through problems with their roommate, of course, with their RA or the resident advisors? Or if there's your student is facing mental health challenges, and those are also very, very common. College is not right for all students immediately following high school. We know that the data has shown that. And not all colleges are right for all students. And keep in mind when your student first went to look at the campus of Georgia Tech, that was a long time ago. Their brain was very developmentally different than it is now. And the student has changed quite a bit since that decision. Most students are happy with their college eventually, but transfer rates are up, and it's something to keep in mind. You should normalize the challenges of that first semester of college. I can't tell you enough how important that is for students to hear. And you could do your own research, read some articles there about those normal challenges of the first semester of college. If you went to college yourself, or even if you didn't, but you left home as a young adult, maybe at age 18, this is a great time to share some of those challenges with your kids if you haven't yet done so. And of course, you have to be careful about what you share, but especially if your student has struggled and they're home and you're having some deep conversations about it, it really helps normalize the situation if you kind of harken back to your 18-year-old self and say, these are the places that I struggle to live independently and the decision-making challenges that I had. Students whose parents are aware of the struggles that they face in high school, especially including depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and in the extreme self-harm, they're particularly reticent to let their parents know of any ongoing issues and struggles. And that can be a real tough situation because students have their minds often set that adulting means not asking for help, doing it on their own. Of course, as parents, we know that's not the case. We know the definition of adulting includes getting help, asking others to aid us, using our resources. But we really haven't done a great job, I think, in our society of teaching teens that adulting means more than doing it independently. So, if they are struggling, make sure that you are sitting down with them, talking about the health center on campus, talking about students' activities that they can get involved in, peer leaders that they might talk to, like a first year advisor, or their orientation leader or their RA, and their academic advisor as well, or their dean, really people that they connect with. So keep in mind if your student did struggle with some pretty big issues, especially mental health related issues, in high school, students might be a little bit nervous about opening that can of worms with you. I can't wait to get out of here and go back to college. Oh, does that hurt as a parent? But we do hear it often. And I can't tell you enough how important it is to be prepared for this and try not to be hurt or insulted. Picture the freedom they are returning to, the freedom they left, and that they came home to something quite different, probably didn't feel like freedom to them when they were under your roof. And now they're thinking, they're talking to their college friends, or they're texting with their college friends, and they're talking about returning to campus. This is actually something wonderful to hear, even if it hurts just a little bit as a parent. This means that they've found their college community of same age peers. It's exactly what we want. We want them to feel that college is their second home. And their new home and their old home can live in harmony, but sometimes it takes work. And for students who come home both for Thanksgiving and winter break, Thanksgiving might be a little iffy, a little touch and go, and that may have been worked out by the time they come home for winter break. Don't forget the stress of your student wondering which college would work for them. Try to think back when they were making a decision about which colleges to apply to and which colleges to that they were accepted to that they should attend. Their desire to return to campus is actually a reason to celebrate. So even if it hurts our heartstrings a little bit, when you hear, I can't wait to get out of here and go back to college, that means that that journey has been quite a successful one and they have found their community there. Rules. Are you serious? That's something we do hear from students coming home. Your household, your rules. But again, discuss in advance to avoid conflict. So if you have strong feelings about them, for example, borrowing a family car or coming home because of with a curfew, these are things I would not wait for them to come into your house to talk about these things, but I would talk to them in advance. Hey, I want to set some ground rules before you come home. I know it's kind of going to be a little bit awkward for both of us. You've lived independently. We haven't had you at home, and we both have to adjust. So I would encourage you to discuss what I like to call non-negotiables, and those can be the timing of meals, right? Well, I don't eat till 8 o'clock at night. It doesn't matter when you're home. For family time, we eat at 6:30. I don't really want to go visit grandma. I don't want to spend time with the neighbors. These are family obligations. These are visits we have planned. And the earlier in advance you talk about those non-negotiables, the better. I would also argue that it's important for them to have some non-negotiables. I need sleep. I need to get my work done. So you can really kind of talk in advance about some of these things. It'll set you up for a much easier visit. Rethink the word curfew to include more realistic expectations. So I know in high school you had to be home by midnight. I'm not going to give you a curfew now that you're in college, or I'm going to give you a later curfew now that you're in college. But I expect a text or a call by a certain time. So you can have those rules for sure. You are their parent. This is your home. And then I would well in advance share expectations. There's several of us sharing a car. You do have to pick up your clothes, help load the dishwasher, etc. Talk to them in advance about chores that you're expecting. Cleanliness, I mentioned earlier, just let them be in their room and close the door. But in terms of the whole space, of the shared space, that living room space, dining room space, right? Sleeping in can really affect family dynamics and can really anger parents. So talking to them in advance about what time you expect them to get up, or here's a day you can sleep all day. It's up to you. And then manners, and that seems kind of small, but something that first year college parents report, I don't know what happened to my kids' manners. Well, they have been dealing and living with people their age, right? And they haven't lived with adults in quite a while. So give them a little bit of time to transition back to that. College students do need to be reminded how their behavior impacts others. They have really been focused very developmentally appropriately on their own needs in college. And that 18 to 20-year-old brain is very egocentric. Part of that is great because they're creating their own identities and they're figuring out who they are. But at the same time, it's sometimes hard with that information to come back into a home that they share with their family. You may hear, I'm a different person now. And that can be a wonderful thing to hear and sometimes an awkward thing to hear for parents. So keep in mind that most colleges are demographically different from their home communities. So most high schools are much more homogeneous. That includes race, economic diversity, obviously geographic diversity. Your community might have a particular political leaning or ideology, or even a very similar religion or religions in that community. But your students are coming home from Georgia Tech, which is extremely and wonderfully diverse. And they have been, their eyes have been opened to lots of different people from different backgrounds and different experiences. We, of course, have no control over what ideas will resonate with our, 19-year-old kids. Reinventing the self is really part of the transition to college and the new college identity. So even though it might seem strange, my kid's no longer there. Who is this person? Who have they become? That's part of the journey. And the more we can be prepared for it, the better. Keep in mind that 18 to 19-year-olds really embrace news and views and their ideas very quickly. So they might be very willing to take on a new identity and kind of try it on for a little while. And it might not sit right with you. In terms of academics, they have now been asked, unlike in high school, but in college, they've been asked to draw their own conclusion and even criticize and challenge authors and authorities, right? May have an assignment that says, I want you to challenge this adult's way of thinking. And if you're not expecting that, that can be really, really dramatic for many family dynamics. A successful college experience includes being exposed to worlds they never knew existed. Your student may come home having taken an anthropology class on different religions or cults, for example, and have whole new things to talk about. Try not to let it worry you. Think about them expanding their brains. And they're also going to be trying out new ideas and behaviors. And sometimes we can see that as quite challenging. And that can scare us a little bit. But keep in mind, the earlier we think about this, the better. So I want to kind of finish with these top 10 reminders for parents. So the first one is focusing on quality time versus quantity time. Knowing that their time at home is short anyway, and it's even going to be more limited by their sleep and their schoolwork and any kind of family activities or Thanksgiving dinners, for example, that you might have. So really focus on that quality time, not necessarily the quantity time. And think about how you want to spend that time. Do you really want to sit around watching TV or you want to have some in-depth conversations? And maybe it's a balance of both. I would say to parents, pick your battles. They are not going to be the perfect high school kid that they may have been, and or they may shift completely. So think about your particular kid and what kind of battles you really want to pick. Their bedroom neatness, what they eat and how often they eat, how they look, what they choose to wear, which might be very, very different than before they left for college. So I would say don't criticize them about everything. You do know your rules, but do pick your battles. Number three is don't overprogram. Remember that you need time to get reacquainted with this new college student that's coming to you and time to relax with them. And that can be some of lots of high school students, excuse me, college students and new college parents report that that's kind of the best part of Thanksgiving time home. Not necessarily the big Thanksgiving dinner, but actually just hanging out in your pajamas and talking and relaxing and telling you a little bit about who they're becoming. Remember also that they are bringing home college stress. And that might include Greek life. That might include clubs and organizations. That might include maybe they feel like they're really doing poorly in a class, or maybe they felt that they had a career path and it just doesn't seem to be working out academically for them, and things might have to shift and change. So they are bringing home college stress, and just because they walk through the door of their childhood home doesn't mean that college stress disappears. So, depending on how open you are as a family, but you can talk about that to any degree, but do acknowledge, what kind of stress are you bringing home? I can't imagine that you don't have some college stress. What's on your mind? Those are great conversation starters. And I really encourage families to balance that my baby is home with not babying your adult child. And I can't stress that enough. You can really set a student who's just on the brink of identity change or just on the brink of, managing kind of self-care if you're doing too much for them. So if they're used to doing their laundry at home, I know it's so nice maybe to do that load for them, but let them keep being an adult when they're home. Asking what they miss from home before they come home and what you can provide, right? That might include food, but it also can include traditions, cultural traditions, family traditions, religious traditions. And sometimes we're surprised when we hear, maybe I can't find any hot sauce on my college campus, or I just miss sitting around and playing this particular game. So ask them in advance and make sure that you work that into that holiday schedule. Make time to discuss big stuff, right? Those concerns, grades. Don't say when you only have 5 minutes before a Thanksgiving meal, like, how's stuff going, right? But think about it. Make sure you have good 30, 40 minutes to say, how are your grades? Let's talk about which classes are going well and what's not going well. What kind of feedback have you gotten on your papers from professors? What's frustrating you? Talking a little bit about budgeting as well. How are you doing with budgeting? How are your meal swipes? Are you buying your own food, snacks for your dorm room? How's that going? And then their behavior as well. If you are struggling maybe with communicating with them when they're in college and you want to have that conversation about, we thought we were going to talk once a week, but we don't really hear from you much. We do have some conversations that we have to have. Students say, I wish parents wouldn't say it, just as I get home or just as I'm heading back or right before a big meal. I'd love to have a little time to talk about that. Don't expect perfection. If they are coming home both for Thanksgiving and for winter break, think of Thanksgiving as practice for this longer time that they're home. And, the earlier that as parents, we know not to expect perfection, the better. But again, I can't stress enough having conversations with them on the phone or by text in advance. Hey, I just want to kind of talk through Thanksgiving, what your expectations are and what my expectations are. I think you're setting yourself up for success. Number 9, setting homecoming expectations and discuss those common challenges before arrival. You can bring up some of the things you've learned in this webinar, some of the things that might be on your mind. And remember, their wanting to return to campus is positive and it is not a criticism of home or a criticism of you as a parent. So here are some final thoughts, and then I would love to take some Q&As. Be curious about who your child is becoming and what they are learning, even if sometimes they're saying things that really can shock us. Cut them some slack as they're playing with new ideas and identities, and think about when they were younger. Bring that same spirit of curiosity to interactions with your adult child that you did when you saw them as a baby and their new expressions, or your toddler's new words. I know a lot of families still joke about words that were said incorrectly when our students were learning language, or your young child's curiosity about the world. Think about that as they're playing with new ideas and new identities. And if a student is coming back home and says, I have really been rethinking some political bend, or I've been rethinking, economic inequality, something that maybe you haven't talked about at length, or something that you're surprised they're talking about. Let them talk, let them play with these new ideas and identities, but remember not to be nervous. So if your meat eater is now a vegetarian, it doesn't mean it's permanent, it's temporary. And I would encourage them to play with those new ideas and identities. That's something we sent them to college to do, and we have to welcome them home with those new identities. Remember that you as a parent help to make college possible for your teen. Don't forget to give yourself some credit if they are coming home and challenging you and the world. So I'd love to take some questions, and I do want to put out, I mentioned the Talking College card decks. They look something like this, and they're actually filled with discussion prompts, and they're great for the Thanksgiving table about all different themes that take place on the college campus, not just the transition to college, but things they're experiencing, and lots of what would you do scenarios that you can kind of tease out with them. There is a promo code, which is BUZZ, B-U-Z-Z, and you can use that at talkingcollege.com. It's just for Georgia Tech families. And you can also go to that QR code and find it. And I encourage you to follow me on social media as well. I mentioned I'm a college transition educator. There's lots of free events and giveaways and things like that that you'll find on my social media. So thank you so much for listening, and I would love to take any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Brenner. All right, pepper us with your questions, y'all. Um, I'm sure that your brains are flowing with so many thoughts of your student coming home and what that's going to be like. Um, so whether you're, or even if you're not a first year family, you're a little more seasoned family, we'd love to hear from you as well. Maybe even some things that you experienced and you'd like to share too.
Really?
Give you a second to think about it. Don't be shy. Um, I know one of your last slides, Dr. Brenner, I was sitting here thinking about how it really actually relates. Some of them relate to just having a child at home in general, like your
Absolutely.
your list. I was like, oh, that's really good. I was thinking through that. All right, we do have a question that just popped in. My daughter will be coming home to a new house in a new town. What can we do to make her first trip here special but not overwhelming? First, good job.
Ooh,
So
that is
thoughtful.
a great question. I assume your daughter knows that you moved. Um, and hopefully you've shared, or you can share, some photos and images with her so she knows what to expect. It's a very, very strange feeling for a student, but the more you talk about it, the better. It can be really exciting for her. Show her pictures of her room, her space, maybe allow her to set things up when she comes home so she does feel that there's a place for her. But home doesn't mean the address. Home is where family is. And that particular house means so little to that 18, 19-year-old brain. They just want to be with their family for sure. So again, preparation is where it's at for sure. It can be a little more of a transition. I've heard lots of families that do this. They move when their kids in college. But again, prepare them, send them photos, ask their advice about decorating certain things, make them a part of it for sure. And then make sure you have the same traditions that carry over so they realize it's not the house, but it's the home.
Yeah, it's good. I would say too, like maybe say maybe we can't make everything food wise that we normally do, or tell me what your top three favorite things are that you really want to have while you're home or something like that, getting them all the warm and fuzzies. Awesome. What other questions do we have? That was a great question, Molly. Or like I said, anybody that has a tip that they have experienced so far. Maybe even if you've had a student, maybe this is your second or third student to go to college and an experience you might like to share. Okay, what can I do if my first year college student doesn't want to show us his grades or talk about his academic situation because he thinks that he's in charge of that now, not the parents?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and it comes up in many webinars that I give, even unrelated to Thanksgiving. This is something that ideally it's great to talk about before the first time that you see them for a visit home. If you are playing a big part of financing college, that's something that you can expect. And they don't necessarily have to show you every single paper. But let's remember that a lot of parents are used to those grade portals, that being a part of that, right? But part of going to college means doing things independently, right? And there's a federal law that actually keeps us as parents from seeing things like that without a waiver. But that doesn't mean that parents can't insist on things. So I need to see, for example, where you are in all your classes. Tell me where your standing is in all classes. And if they push back, you can say, let's make a rule together because it's important for me to be prepared if, you are a young adult now, you have a relationship with the college, and they are viewing you as a young adult, but you're still my kid, and I'm still helping you pay for that college experience, probably. Um, and so I have families that I've worked with who say, I need to know every grade that is below a B minus. That can be our agreement. And know that the first semester of college can be kind of touch and go. And we do expect them to change and grow. And so this can also be an opportunity for you to say, this maybe didn't go so well if it didn't, and let's have a plan for the spring semester. So do keep in mind it's not perfection you're looking for. It's certainly not straight A's you're looking for. I also would encourage you to have conversations with your student about the differences between high school and college. And high school is so grade driven, and it has to be because those grades are what are going to get them into their college. But college is so much more about learning than it is about grades. Obviously, grades matter if they're failing a class. I'm not saying that they don't, but instead of asking them grades, 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 you can ask them about what they're learning. So let's go through all your classes. Tell me what you're learning. What are you thinking about differently having taken this class? So expand that conversation beyond grades to that learning experience as well. And, once you actually do see what their grades are for the semester, you can come up with a plan for the spring if things weren't exactly as you had hoped.
So kind of in tandem with that, and I'll answer this. Somebody said my daughter requested a waiver and received a letter from Georgia Tech that the waiver is not allowed, question mark. That is correct. So we do not supply waivers. And it's, that can feel really uncomfortable, but I think everything that Dr. Brenner just said, I think you want to start with the relationship and the conversation anyways. And so yeah, we do not do that at Georgia Tech, but I think the heart of what I do is hopefully encouraging you all to continue to build upon that relationship that you have with your students, so it can be open lines of communication without a waiver really can just
Yeah.
sort of be a
And
non.
thank you for that, Sharon. And one thing I would add is, we shouldn't expect our college students to go from dependent to independent overnight. It
No.
is a transitional process. It's not just the transition from high school to college, but it's a transition in that first full year of college, and even into the second year of college. And, students are making mistakes. They have challenges for sure. We know the national data shows us that most college students across the country aren't regularly going to professors' office hours until their sophomore spring, which is not great.
Mhm.
We of course encourage all students to go starting in their first year, but do know that if your student is struggling either academically or socially, it doesn't mean they're not college ready. We just have to kind of be a little more patient as they kind of figure out these new waters.
Switching topics. Well, first we'll just say, Carrie, thank you for your comment. She said this was great to help us normalize and understand their young adult brains, helping with reminding us to be patient and understanding. Absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. We have another question. When our son comes home, he often doesn't feel like talking a lot with us. How could we induce longer, deeper conversations?
Well, certainly conversation prompts are a great way to start. Either my talking college cards or you can come up with your own. And some of those are what would you do scenarios that really bring especially shy or introverted kids out of into a talking environment. We know this because they sell conversation prompts for the Thanksgiving table. They sell them for, first dates. They're great ways. They've been tested to really bring out those conversations. And one way is to think about what would you do scenarios to encourage conversations. So, what would you do if? And then you can come up with anything that might work with your particular student. What would you do if your student, if you talking to your student has a friend in a different socioeconomic level and you want to go out for pizza and they say, I can't eat off campus because all of my meals are covered by my scholarship and everything has to be on campus. How would you handle that? So kind of giving them not, a very open-ended conversation prompts, not with a yes or no answer. Of course, students who don't speak that much are easy to give a yes or no answer. So I love the idea of kind of peppering them with what would you do scenarios? What would you do in a situation where a college friend is sick from alcohol? How would you handle that situation now that you're a college student? And hopefully they know some of those resources. Hopefully they pick some things up, but it's a great way to start. So my response would be the best way to evoke conversation would be some of these what would you do scenarios.
And the only thing I would just kind of slip in there too, well, your slide about rest, right? So I know that Dean Stein with our Tech Talks, which shameless plug, that's happening next Tuesday for our What's Buzzing. He talks a lot about that when students come home for the holidays. I just want to kind of echo that need for rest. I mean, they have just used their brains so much. So yeah, but I get it where it's like, but okay, he's had the rest. He's still not plugging in with us. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. My daughter, age 19, is trying to maintain a long distance relationship with another college student of the same age in a different state. She seems to be very close to him emotionally, and they've had kind of a falling out, or not really a breakup, but sort of close. They ended up working it out, but this will probably come up again. The turmoil they will be going through was causing her to miss class and the lab. What would you tell her as far as, hey, you're young, keep your options open?
That's a really tough one. And of course, there's not one solid answer. Every relationship is different. Every teen is different. Again, the earlier the better. Hey, I'd love to talk to you about this relationship. I know it's been a little bit tumultuous. What are some things you want to just vent about? What are some things you'd like advice on? I don't want to ask you for, I'm going to offer advice that's not warranted. But I've had, as an adult, I've had a lot more experience with relationships than you have. What are you struggling with? What are the things you're concerned about? I love the idea of asking students in advance, do you want to vent or do you want me to help you problem solve? I think that's great. And you can tweak that any way that works for you. I would explain to them for sure that you understand how serious they feel about this person, even if you don't really. I think that really can allow them to see us as, having a conversation on their level, not necessarily, we talk about horizontal parenting and vertical parenting, right? And vertical parenting is what we've done from K through 12. We're in charge and we parent down. Horizontal parenting doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to be your kid's best friend, but it means we're trying to engage more in adult conversations. Of course, we're older adults, they're younger adults, but we're moving from that vertical, ideally, to horizontal parenting. And you can even explain that to them and talk about how your relationship is going to change. And when they start talking about people they love or people they have relationships with, and you want to know because you want to understand them, especially if they're struggling with some things. I would actually explain that vertical versus horizontal. Here's how you would have handled this when you were in high school. But now that you're in college and you're handling things independently, I'm not looking to be your best friend, but I want to be there for you. And I can incorporate this in my relationship with you. Let's have some conversations about this.
Mm, yeah. Awesome. All right, another one. I'm getting my extended family visiting during Thanksgiving. I planned in a way that my daughter gets 4 days with us before they come, but she's been telling me that she needs to study for end of semester exams. I'm still anxious how she will react.
Um, I'm glad that student is honest with you that she needs to study. That's important. And I would kind of set up a schedule with her. It sounds like you have a great situation where you have time alone with her, which is fantastic, and then time that you have to share with the family. She can't do all of that studying when the family's there, and she can't do all of that studying when you have your alone time with her. So let her know that in advance. These are some rules and regulations I have. We're going to have to kind of figure out how you're going to get that done over these two periods of time. What's the best way to do this? But I do expect you to see grandma. I also expect you to spend time with us. You're not going to be out of either of them, but we will allow you time in each environment to do your work and your studying. And again, the earlier you talk about this, the better, so there are no surprises.
Setting expectations. Goodness,
Absolutely.
the best. Well, no more questions at this time unless somebody else pops one in, but we do have a thank you. We really appreciate your seminar. Thank you all for being here. We can't do it. It takes the speaker and the guests, right? And good conversation. So
Absolutely.
we thank you all for being here too. I'll give it one more second just in case there's anything lingering or you've kind of thought about it and you want to pop it in. But yeah, I love this time of year, you guys. Like I just love the balance that you all, I think, will bring to them coming home, filling your cup, filling their cup. Like there's such an opportunity here. I guess I should is really what I'm trying to say. There's really an opportunity for both sides of it. So, let's see. Ooh, we had a hand raised. Let me see if I can figure out how to do. I don't know if I can do that. Ooh, maybe it went away. I think it was just like a quick up and down. If you have a question, pop it in the chat really quick, or the Q&A rather. Either way, maybe not. Okay. Well, with that, thank you, Dr. Brenner. Any final words that you want to give?
Thank you for having me. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. You've got this. It's not going to be perfect. Don't expect perfection, but enjoy your young adults who are going to be growing and changing, and that's what's supposed to happen.
That's right. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for you all. With that, go Jackets, everyone, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks, guys. Good
Thanks.
night.